People from Africa, whenever they move to Pakistan, I see them still very aligned with their cultural identity. As an example, your clothing. Normally, like all the foreigners who move to Pakistan, like everyone will start wearing suits and everything.
Countries where you see indirect rule, Uganda, many countries in West Africa, especially Nigeria, culture is left intact. And countries where you have direct rule, you see these guys wearing three-piece suit in the hottest place on earth, which wasn't meant for it. So just there's difference in how colonialism impacted.
How do you see the Pakistani society, culturally speaking? Do you think we are intact?
No, you're very much intact. I must say, for the last year and so I've been here, I've discovered the richness of your music. It's a very much rich country in culture and heritage. If you didn't know Pakistan, you think the minute you land at the airport, you will be kidnapped and there will be bombs everywhere, which is completely far from the truth. I told somebody recently that if GDP was measured in terms of hospitality, Pakistan will be the richest country in the world.
And if you talk about gender-based violence, where do we lack there as well?
This is a problem of men, I must say. It's not only in Pakistan, but it's a global problem and is actually worse in developing countries. How to deal with this issue is not only morally important, but developmentally important for the country.
And how can we bring women in the rooms where decisions are being made?
Don't leave. This is my other thing. I know many people think the grass is greener somewhere else, but staying and contributing and building this country block by block will be their responsibility. As they always say,
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out. Talk to me a little bit about your background, and then we come to your sort of work world. And one other thing which is quite sort of fascinating for me culturally, people from Africa, whenever they move to Pakistan, I think culturally I see them still very aligned with their cultural identity. As an example, your clothing. Normally, like all the foreigners who move to Pakistan, like everyone will start wearing suits and everything. So where did that sort of come from, and a little bit of your background as well, if you can combine both?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really happy to join this famous podcast. So I'm East African, and I use that deliberately because I was born in Somalia but grew up in Kenya. So border the two countries. But culturally it's the same place. Somalia is a predominantly more than 99% Muslim country. Then I moved to a more diverse Kenya, which is about 30% Muslims, but I lived in the Muslim coast for those who know Kenya, they probably know Mombasa, but just north of Mombasa. So I grew up there, and I grew up in a very diverse culture, and so Pakistan's culture is not very alien to me because I grew up with a lot of people who came from this region during the colonial time in the 1800s and moved to Kenya. A lot of Gujaratis, Ismailis, Bohras. So half of my school was that I went to Aga Khan School, primary school. So a lot of cultural similarities, and then we also, of course, we have African cultures.
And it was quite a multi-cultural school as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's mixed, completely mixed. We have Arabs who came 100 years ago in East Africa from Yemen and Oman. We have people who came from what was the Indian subcontinent before partition. From different parts of what was then the Indian subcontinent. So yes, a lot of diverse group of people around, culturally, food-wise. So coming to Pakistan for me, it wasn't a very alien place in terms of culture. So very familiar with it.
And when you were growing up, what were you thinking? Like, what do you want to do in life at that time? Yeah. Because normally in Pakistan, like if you talk to any youngsters, mostly they don't want it, but like generally the theme is like, okay, engineering or doctor. Yeah. And now people want to be a content creator and influencer and YouTuber, like whoever you ask, like 80-90%. Yeah. But when you were growing up, what were like some of the inspirations or, you wanted to do in the life?
Well, like my first memory, I remember I'm still very much addicted to football. So like most young Africans, we watch a lot of football. So I thought, and you always think you are much better than you really are. So I remember wanting to be a footballer, and I thought this is the place I wanted to go. Then I realized quickly when I started playing with kids from cities, because I grew up in a small town, I realized I wasn't as good as I thought I was. So you go through different sense of where you want to go as a child, and that's fine in terms of the future. But I can certainly tell you, working for the UN wasn't one of them until much later, when I was a teenager, and seeing the work of the UN with a huge level of displacement from Somalia. Millions of Somalis crossed the border during the war in the 90s. And that's when I got into the idea that, seeing the work of UNHCR, seeing the work of UNFPA, UNICEF, UNDP, and taking care of a lot of refugees who were running out of conflict coming to our hometown in the Kenyan coast, made me curious about the UN. And that's where my journey started in terms of thinking what I want to do.
And what did you study in your university life?
So I did my first degree, bachelor's degree, was in philosophy, history, and philosophy. They call it politics. But then in my master's degree, I did a bit of economics and a bit of social sciences. Yeah.
Okay. And where did the interest of politics and history comes from?
Well, I think it's very normal when you go in a developing country. Politics is the center of everything. You are very much exposed to, especially for those who grew up after 1990 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Multi-partyism came into, at least in East Africa. A lot of campaigning with politicians. You get to be very curious. I was very curious more on the history side of things. I wanted to know how societies were organized, where we came from as society, and where we wanted to go. So those are the kind of areas. So I was always good with history and politics. I was very curious. I was one of those kids who's listening to radios, finding out who's winning the elections, who's running.
But you did not thought of moving into politics, as a profession?
I did think about it, but then I realized that probably I'm not electable. So, especially, I come from a very minority group in the Kenyan context, politics of majority tribes, and in many countries where you are at the early stages of development, and you introduce a multi-party democracy, what happens normally is people associate around tribes because there isn't class system. In developed countries, you say, I will vote for A because I will get tax cuts. I'm a businessman, I don't want to pay tax. In more developing countries, I vote for A because he looks like me, he speaks my language. And so when you come from a minority tribe, your ability to win on arguments alone are not sufficient. So I didn't get into it. Yeah.
Earlier we talked about culture. Why do you think that part of the world is still very intact with their culture? Because normally we have seen, again, if the Westerns are coming to Pakistan, or maybe other sometimes Asian countries as well, people are not really maybe they are connected, but they don't want to show too much sometimes. Yeah. But with the Africans, I just did actually a round table with 4 African, I think they were 3 girls and 1 boy, 3 boys and 1 girl. And few of them are living in Pakistan for 20 years. One, I think she born here or something, and all of them came in a very traditional dresses, which is very so why is that?
But it's very, I'm glad you asked, because it's not, it depends where they come from. So if you look again, because I studied history, colonialism impacted countries very differently. And if you look at the essence of colonialism, was to instill the colonizer wants you to believe that you are inferior to them. That's why they're colonizing you. They bring in what they call civilizing mission. That was the idea of colonialism. The countries, also European countries, were colonized in this part of the world, but also in Africa. They were different. So countries where, for example, the British colonialism in Nigeria was indirect rule. Indirect rule means essentially I will find somebody who looks like you to colonize you. They take the money and they just bring you to the British guy. So there wasn't direct interventions. The French system and the Portuguese system was different, it was direct rule. So the consequences are different. So countries where you see indirect rule, Uganda, many countries in West Africa, especially Nigeria, culture is left intact. And countries where you have direct rule, you see these guys wearing 3-piece suit in the hottest place on earth, which wasn't meant for it. So, so just to say there's difference in how colonialism impacted. But there's also recent revival of, in again, the work you do here is part of that in terms of podcasts, the minimization of traditional media, TikTok, social media. People are reconnecting to their roots and their culture, and there's pride in that. So that also plays a role in terms of how people dress, how people look. So there is also, I think it's a very new thing. I remember where people, elites in many African countries will never be seen with traditional clothes because they wanted to look European or they wanted to look different. Those days are finished. Now, in many countries, if you don't speak the lingua, for example, in Kenya, if you don't speak the lingua franca as a politician, it's the same. So you can speak Queen's English as much as you want. If you don't speak Urdu, it's very difficult to access. It's the same in many countries. And that revival is very good because I think every country needs a foundational, cultural foundations that unites the country. And I think this is what's happening in many African countries.
And when you look Pakistan in this context, you have traveled a lot. You said you are going on a very long road trip as well. That part of the world is, that part of Pakistan is very different. How do you see the Pakistani society? Because you guys are working in a very, very remote area, which is like real Pakistan. If you go out from Islamabad, Lahore, Karachi, like culturally speaking, do you think we are intact with the culture, or like we are also going into different sort of directions?
No, you're very much intact. I mean, I must say, for the last year and so I've been here, I've discovered the richness of your music. It's a very much rich country in culture and heritage. If you go to the Sufi shrines in Sindh, or you go to the rubber players of KPK, you listen to the Punjabi music that comes out of Punjab. So you have a lot of heritage and diverse heritage. So in that sense, you have the right foundation for stronger national identity. So no, I'm incredibly, I must tell you, there's so much I didn't know before I came to Pakistan, that this is the home of the Indus civilization. This is, it has the most incredible glaciers in the world. So a lot of things going on for Pakistan. But I think one thing you will agree, and I think many Pakistanis will agree, is we haven't done very well in telling this incredible story of Pakistan.
Really bad PR people, you know.
You need better marketers. So the country has so much to offer. I told somebody recently that if GDP was measured in terms of hospitality, Pakistan will be the richest country in the world because you're the most hospitable people. So there's so many good things about this country.
And what was your perception when you were in Africa? Because again, when you ask someone from the West, they have a very different perception, like BBC and CNNs. But what were your sort of perception living in your country?
It's the same. So the problem of what I call colonized societies is we get to be told about each other through the metropolitan, whoever colonized. So if you are Senegalese and you want to know about a colonized French country, let's say, I don't know, somewhere in the Pacific, where do you hear the news? From a French source. The same if you're Pakistani, you want to know about Africa, you get it from the BBC, CNN. But those days are changing now. And that the perceptions are reinforced through that source. So if you didn't know Pakistan, you think the minute you land at the airport, you'll be kidnapped and there will be bombs everywhere.
There will be camels on the road.
There will be camels on the road, which is completely, far from the truth. But how do we push that narrative back? And I think your voice and many Pakistani young people's voices on social media, the stories we tell about Pakistan, of course, the country has challenges, a lot of social challenges to overcome. the vision that the founding father had for this country is not there yet, but you are in that journey. So it's really important we show Pakistan that is glass is half full, and there's so much incredible stories to tell. And we in the United Nations think that the first stage of development is in the mind. Love of country, hopefulness, a better tomorrow are key ingredients for development. And I think Pakistan has all those ingredients.
And if you go back a little bit, so you finish your bachelor's and master's, and then how did you move into this whole development sector? Was that your first job, or you worked somewhere else as well?
No, when I studied in London. I was at university there. When I finished my university, I was kind of lost. Like many students who finish university, suddenly the education you have, the degrees you have don't necessarily mean you walk into a job. This is why engineers, I admire them, because you're going to do engineering. Yeah. When you study social sciences, you really don't know how this will end. So I found I was offered jobs in government. Then I thought it's not for me, and then I saw an NGO by accident, a peace building NGO
in London.
In London, yeah. And I got an internship there, and then that's where my journey for development started. And I was deployed in Sao Tome and Principe, a small little island. I'm sure most of your listeners will not know where it is, but it's somewhere in the West African. It's an island on the Atlantic, ex-Portuguese colony. So I started my career there.
And what was your job there?
It was one of those irresponsible things NGOs do. So I was really sent there. I was my mid-20s. I had an idea, and you know how the system works. I had an idea, and then we got the resources for the idea. The idea was the country discovered a lot of oil, and how can we make sure that the oil that it discovered does not become a curse like many other countries, where it becomes a source of conflict or environmental degradation. So I thought this country has discovered, because between this oil discovery and production is years. So we thought, can we use that gap between discovery and production to put in place systems? And the country had asked us to come. So that was my job, really.
And how many years, or how much did you work there?
3 years. I was there for 3 years. Then I moved to, from there I got a new job. So I was working on the extractive sector, not so much in the business itself, but in terms of the societal impact. How does extraction impact the environment? How does it impact fishing? How does it impact pollution of rivers and all those things? So the next job I was offered was to help countries that have just come out of conflict in West Africa, especially in Liberia, where the diamonds that many lovers give each other and everywhere in the world were becoming a source of conflict and displacement. So that's when the first UN started working for the UN to make sure the diamonds that were produced can be traced back to where it was produced, to make sure it's conflict-free diamonds.
And which UN organization was that?
UNDP.
Okay.
I was working for UNDP at that time. So I was actually based working closely with the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Liberia, and also the region, the other diamond producing.
And what countries. Did you learn from your first job? So that was your first job was to, like a small NGO working in a development sector. What did you learn about the development sector in your first job?
One of the most incredible things I've learned, and I say this to others, is I was shocked on, when you come in as a new person into a job, you think all the other people who are there have worked 20 years are much smarter, and they're really not that smart. And you walk in there, you think, my God, I have to wait until I absorb everything they know. So the first advice I give people is trust in your own experience, in your own education, in your own capabilities. Because if today's technological advancement from AI are not by old people, they're young people. And things that we are progressing on every sector of society is led by young people. So it's really, so going back, advice one is do not be intimidated, and always believe that you have so much to contribute when you walk in. It took me some time to get the confidence, but in many of my interaction, I was quite taken back with how so-called experienced experts knew very little in the area that they were working in.
But also, like, what did you learn about the development sector as a whole? Because that was a very new sector for you, and now, like, you know, all the way, like, couple of years, what did you learn from the first job about this sector? Because it also evolved, like, over time.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because the sector, when it was set up, either through the UN or through NGOs, many people who this philanthropic organization, corporate social responsibility by, I think the motives are very pure and very clear. We want to help communities, countries to recover. It took us a long time to understand that actually those communities have better understanding of their own challenges, and the actually solutions are mainly can be found within those communities. And for me, what has been a key guiding principle has always been that the countries, I always tell people, don't think that you love whoever you're supporting or which country you're supporting more than they love themselves. Sometimes
it's a delusion.
It's a delusion, like, oh, I am so in love with them, so I must know better. No, you don't. So always realize that those communities in the countries you serve love themselves equally, and you are there as a support system, not to lecture, not to direct, but a support system in their own journey for the future they want. And I think level of humbleness is some of the experience I've seen over years that works well. When you are humble, you are there to support. It's their country, it's their community, and if they don't want you, they don't want you. And if they want you, you have to listen to the journey they want to take and help them in that journey. And it also, so that part is one of the lessons I always encourage people. Don't feel because you come with a white Land Cruiser, you know everything. But also that development is also a political process. It's not only a technical process. So many people think, oh, you know, this level of poverty exists, so if I can only bring technical solutions. No, there's a political decisions, how resources are allocated, where resources are prioritized, whether women are empowered. There's no point you go to any part, anywhere in the world, if you bring the best ideas and you have half of your population discriminated against, or not given an opportunity, or not educated, you're not going anywhere. So how do you deal with the social and economic basis of underdevelopment? I think that is also the key part of understanding what kind of support and
now when you look your life, it's been how many years you're in the development sector, roughly?
Let's just say I had hair when I started, and now I have no hair. Nearly 20 something years, 22 years. 22, 23 years.
But so did your understanding sort of changed in the last 23 years from your first job to your job in Pakistan right now about the development sector?
Absolutely. There's so many things you learn. What to prioritize in your support system. What are the software components of development? I talked about the mind. I have seen in many countries, if people don't have confidence in their own, as an individual, as a nation, if the nation doesn't have the confidence, it's very difficult to develop, you know? So there has to be the different components of this idea of development, rights. They're not luxury. When you tell people women should have equal opportunity to be educated, to contribute, it's not only a basic rights issue. It's also self-interest for the country. So you learn all those, the role of young people. And now I'm much older. I really, if I had my choice, I would want to be surrounded by young people because they have technological solutions. They're much more tolerant. They're much more open to new ideas. So how much weight we put on long experience in bringing about progress. Again, how much we give opportunities to energy and innovation. So all these things are part of that learning process.
So if we come to your your role in Pakistan now. So you moved here. Did you like sort of apply? Like, do you need to apply, or do you just get like, okay, this is your next posting? How does that work in the development sector?
In my case, it was both. I had finished my time in Nigeria. I was there 4 years and a half, and then I was asked to apply by a senior UN people who make decisions in the UN to come to Pakistan, of course. And I thought that was a fantastic opportunity to be in a country that you hear a lot about. I worked in Afghanistan, so I was very close.
Which years you worked there?
2008-9.
Okay.
So coming here was a huge opportunity. And the UN work here is very big and complex. We have 4,000 staff, 300 offices. We are in every province in the country. So joining such incredible team was an honor. So it didn't take me a long time to say absolutely. Yeah.
In a more simple language, can we say you're a spokesperson of UN in Pakistan, like in a way?
In a very crude way, there's an ambassador of the UN.
Got it.
In a crude way. Some may contest that as well, but just to explain, the Secretary General's representative, his ambassador, is the resident coordinator. So that's my job. And then we have 24 technical agencies that do specific technical work they work with the provinces, but also with ministries. For example, WHO. It's here to help the country, for example, defeat polio, to eradicate polio. They work with the Ministry of Health and they work with health ministries of provinces, focused on health issues. You have UNFPA. They deal specifically with helping the government deal with population management, gender equality, women's empowerment. So each agency has its technical support, but it's very important for your listeners to know that nobody's here that the government of Pakistan doesn't want them to be here. And the government of Pakistan has not told them what to do. So we're here to support government plans and the people of Pakistan. So we don't turn up here uninvited. And we have an agreement with the government on the areas that we work on. We call it cooperation framework. So the government says, we just want you to support A, B, C, D. That's it. And all our programs and support goes to that area.
And what challenges do you face working in Pakistan as a UN, as a whole? Like, what are some of the challenges?
There's a lot. First, financing is a huge challenge because the UN, we don't print money. We rely on the generosity of other member states, including Pakistan. Pakistan finances the UN. So there's never enough resources to meet the development challenges Pakistan has. 26 million children out of school, 20 million children stunted, malnutrition issues. Women, how do we change cultural and societal habits to advance women's economic and political involvement? So all those areas need investment. So that is one challenge, and it's a global challenge, but also profound here. The other problem, the unique problem that Pakistan has, is the issue around climate change, because literally you invest in Pakistan, you pay your taxes, the government builds roads, and they're literally washed away by floods and droughts and other problems you have. So the climate change aspect really stunts Pakistan's development journey. So that is another huge challenge that the country faces. And then just how do you coordinate the social policies? 18th Amendment moves to the provinces. How do you coordinate federal, provincial aspect to make sure that, for example, the government has there's a new strategy on Uran, Pakistan, with a specific focus on export, but how much is that policy aspect been implemented at the provincial level? So this is a policy coordination and consistency, some of those challenges that we deal with.
And all of these challenges which you mentioned, obviously we are seeing these for the last, minimum 2 decades. And do you think we are trying to sort of fix it, because when you see the numbers, like there's not as such improvement in these or in all of these issues, whether it's a polio, whether it's a problem with the child marriage to overall child nutrition, like other issues. Where are we lacking? Because again, the money is coming, it's spending, and like we'll talk about USAID, and now the whole development sector is sort of shaking now as well.
Yeah.
But what's the one thing which we are not doing it correctly, that rather than after still like 20-30 years, we are still like standing almost at the same point?
No, I started before I say that. Let me just repeat it. Development is a trial and error. It's not an exact science, right? Because you can have brilliant ideas. They mean very little if it doesn't land in the societal and cultural foundation of the country you're operating in. So the issue of gender equality, for example, how do you solve that challenge? It's not only one around let's have a publicity that this is a good thing to do. It's much more of a science. Why? I always like the quotes of your founding father, Mohamed Yahya, who recognized early on that if women are not equal, Pakistan will not progress. I mean, it's in many of his quotes. You look at what he has said. He knew this in 1947. So the question is, why has that not happened? And what are the societal foundations that is making gender equality a challenge for the country? So it's more of a science of why is that? How can change? Who's scared of change, and how can that come about? So to do that, you need a level of policy consistency. This brings me back to the issue of policy consistency, because Pakistan, and I always say this, you need a long period of one specific policy being implemented. So if you have a lot of change in government, each new government comes in and there's a new approach. And then another government comes in, there's a new approach. So the issue of policy consistency is recognized by most political leaders in this country. There's a need for Pakistan to have a longer term implementation. And I think that's one area. The other areas is really, I don't really have the answers. I think everybody knows what the challenges are. Pakistan has one of the highest human capital. I mean, I'll give you some. I came to development because of the writings of Mahbub al-Haq. He used to be a finance minister under Ayub Khan. This country has everything. It's you have the best economists. You have wonderful engineers. So human capital is not an issue. So maybe just putting those ingredients together and having a bit of a consistency in policy may be one of the areas. But one of the things we do in development is to constantly, essentially never giving up, always being hopeful and keep on prodding until change happens. But I always tell people I am very, very hopeful about Pakistan.
Also, do you feel like one of the problem which I see a lot of times, I think, is with all of these development countries, because there is a bit of a reliance on the development aid and development funding. So eventually you don't start thinking too much about that, okay, we need to sustain on our own. Okay, whatever government is there, the money will come, we'll figure it out. It's not that, okay, like a startup, you just need a initial sort of money to start running the business. And then eventually you want to run your business on your own rather than the grant money or something.
Development financing is really important because it's catalytic. It starts something. But development never happens through external financing. There is never a story of external financing being the only reason why a country develops, right? It helps. So after the Second World War, the Marshall Plan helped Europe to come back, right? Helped Japan to find its feet. But so it's important, but it's not the number one key determinant. The key determinant is a clear vision by the country itself, implementation strategy, not only ideas. And one of the challenges I understand in Pakistan is that you have brilliant ideas, that the implementation is a problem. So how do you actually have the implementation capabilities? And then I come back to the software of development. the mindset, optimism. I have never seen a pessimistic person win anything. I'm telling you. I mean, I come from a region where we win Olympic gold on long distance running. And the key ingredients for winners is optimism. You know, it doesn't mean you don't talk about the challenges, or you're not frustrated about the challenges or the inaction you may see from whoever's making decisions. But you can't lose optimism. And I think people who are very optimistic about the future tend to want to do much better. Even apparently, there's studies about psychologists who talk about the mind of an optimist against somebody who always sees barriers, and apparently the optimists live longer because you're a very hopeful person. And I encourage people to be much more optimistic of a future. I go back to the issue of why you still have huge numbers of people, like children out of school, and I think those are valid and can be frustrating for Pakistanis, and why we can't deal with this issue. But there's another part to the story, is population growth, right? So every time you grow in your population, you need more schools and you have more children out of school. So you're adding into the numbers, right? Population. So managing population is also a key ingredient for development. The UN, and here we're led by our colleagues in UNFPA, we don't tell countries you should reduce your population or you should increase your population. That's not our job. Our job is essentially to say that do people have the choice to decide how many children they have? Right? If a couple want to have 2 kids, they should have 2 kids. If they want to have 7 kids, good luck. If you can afford to look after them, go ahead. But the issue is, do they have that choice? And do they have a choice? And this is why we think the choice part of population growth is the most important. Not to tell families how many children they should have, but it's to give a woman the right to choose how many children she wants to have, etc., etc. So that part of uncontrolled or involuntary population growth contributes to the challenges of children out of school, stunting, etc., etc.
And if you talk about gender-based violence, that is also one thing. Generally, the UN organizations, and other than the UN, like everyone talks about that. Where do we lack there as well? Like, what are some of the reasons we are still, like, because now the access of information, the access of internet, there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of information out there, but still, like this, such a big issue, as a country we are facing. Where do we lack, and what are some of the things we are not doing it properly?
If I'm not mistaken, the numbers are really bad here, because you have, is it a third of married women experience violence? The numbers are staggering. Really, this is a problem of men. I must say it's not only in Pakistan, but it's a global problem, and is actually worse in developing countries. How to deal with this issue is not only morally important, but developmentally important for the country. So we having a criminal justice system that deals severely with violence against women, having a zero tolerance culturally and societally is a key component of that. Without it, this path to development will be much more difficult. And the UN works here a lot through UNFPA and UN Women in supporting government, working with the judiciary, in explaining things. I'll tell you a side story on this. When I was in Afghanistan, it was my first time, because the situation there with women, and this was before the current Taliban government. This was during Karzai's period. The issue of gender was still a huge problem. And colleagues used to text me on Facebook those days. We didn't have a WhatsApp. They'll say, "How is it to be a woman in Afghanistan?" And my answer was, "I don't know how it is to be a woman anywhere." So I think also for us men have a responsibility to want to learn. It's not to say that I'm a single guy, I see gender violence, it's not my business. It is your business, because it's your country's business, it's your development business, and that person is somebody's sister, she's half of the population. She gave birth to you, and she's the foundation for the future. She's the one who's going to produce the next Pakistanis. So we need to, as men, we need to be part of the solution on gender-based violence. If we're not, and we make this as somebody else's problem, it's only the problem of the police, judiciary, because these things are societal norms. They're accepted. And once things become unacceptable, that's when you see change.
Do you think we have to teach kids in their early ages as well? Because that is the time where your sort of brain and your all of your thoughts and everything start developing.
Absolutely. So that's the socialization early on. How we speak about women on our day-to-day language. How we what do we teach our kids, especially our young boys, about women and the equality agenda. What is not accepted. It's the same thing with other forms of discrimination. It starts at home. If these things are accepted, if the father flippantly makes a tribal comment about some other tribe and passes it, the child absorbs it. It's the same how if somebody is speaking badly about women, or is a woman comes home, or the father beats up his wife in front of the children, what do you think that child will be doing when they grow up? So this is where the socialization component. But I'm very hopeful about your generation and the new Pakistani young people. And I think hopefully they will be very different, and they will be exposed to a different, because, this is the question of our time in this country. And hopefully the younger, you're young, and other young people who watch your podcasts, maybe they'll be the solution to this.
And we have talked a lot about gender equality generally in the world, and in Pakistan, of course. The development sector is talking, the corporate sector is talking, everyone is talking about that. What are some of the things as a society do you think we have to do to achieve that, the balance?
So I was in Nigeria, as I said, and in Nigeria I had serious debates with politicians and the public. One way is to say, look, because there is a deep ingrained bias against women, especially in politics, to an extent that most women don't vote for women. Because somebody told me, a Nigerian politician told me, if this is half of the voters in Nigeria are women, why are they not voting for women, right? Good question, but they're socialized the same way, to self-hate, to think they're not the right person to manage. So it's the same society. Bias against the women are not only limited to men. It transmits in terms of self-worth. So this is why in some countries the affirmative action part are extremely important for people to see examples that if there's a certain number of seats put aside for women, people will see women leaders. They'll see actually they perform, and they can. Somebody told me, what if a woman becomes a leader and she's incompetent? And I said, well, she has a right to be equally incompetent as men. Because there's so many incompetent men in many positions. Why don't we talk about their gender when they're incompetent? So incompetency is not a gender-based thing. So, but we should give everybody an opportunity. So countries have done this. They've seen a lot of success for inclusion, self-worth. I talked about the self-worth. Self-worth is also to see somebody who looks like you doing great things. Is a young girl and looks on the television and she sees a woman prime minister, a woman minister. She sees, a woman general in the army. She sees a woman industrial lead, CEO. That young Pakistani child already has a sense of worth that will be important for her to contribute to the country, because she knows everything is possible.
And how can we bring women into, because either it's politics or development sector, in the rooms where decisions are being made, because that's where everything sort of start. What are some of the things which we can do?
So first is to give them an opportunity. It starts with education, right? If the girl child is not being educated, you've already deprived her of having that seat, right? And if you look at the children out of school, they're disproportionately girls. So how do we start by giving them equal opportunity from education? At what level of opportunity she gets as a girl child. And then the second parts are, once she gets the right education, she becomes competitive. And there are sectors that are close to her, and there are sectors that are open to her. So how do we deal with the sectors that are close to her? And specifically sectors such as leadership, political leadership, CEOs. How do we give her, that girl who's now a young woman, opportunity to flourish will be important. Because I think every decent human being deep down believes that equality is good. There's some who don't, but gender equality and advancement of women is everybody's business, and the reason it doesn't move sometimes is the silent majority. Those who are not speaking up, those who think it's not my problem, or those women who think I have achieved my one seat in parliament. Thank you. I'm not going to be involved in anybody. Essentially, removing the ladder for the rest. So I think that is what is needed. And I can tell you from the UN, we are committed to supporting Pakistan in its journey for equality. But this is a Pakistani issue. You have to do it yourself. And every young person who's listening to this podcast has to really be involved at this, because at every stage of their life, they see inequality, and most of the time they say nothing about it, and that is why it's reinforced.
Lastly, what would be your advice to a young person watching this conversation, especially young girls?
My message to them is really, you are a generation that can take this country to where it was always supposed to be. A prosperous, peaceful country, and be hopeful. Don't listen to naysayers, and open your minds. And I am excited about that generation because they come with less baggage. So I'm very hopeful. But I just and don't leave. This is my other thing. I know many people think the grass is greener somewhere else. But staying and contributing and building this country block by block will be their responsibility. And for the women who are listening, as they always say, push for equality. You can count on the UN. But somebody once told me, if there's no seat, bring your own seat. And I think that is the spirit that I hope that the young Pakistanis will adopt moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much.